When I opposed selling my store to save my ruined brother, my aunts, uncles, and cousins voted to remove me from the family business. Majority rules. I smiled, pulled out an envelope and said, "Let's read this together." Seconds later, chaos erupted. I'm 34 years old, and until recently, I thought my family was my strength. It turns out they can also be your greatest weakness, especially when one of your own is desperate. It all started with the store my grandparents founded 50 years ago. A gourmet food store that went from a small shop to becoming our family's pride and a landmark in the city. My grandfather, Miguel, always had vision. He started selling imported spices at a time when nobody bet on those flavors in our neighborhood. Over time, my grandmother, Elena, expanded the business, incorporating artisanal preserves and local products. When they retired, the store passed into the hands of their 3 children. My father, Roberto, who passed away 4 years ago, and my uncles, Eduardo and Marta. I practically grew up among shelves of spices and the aroma of imported herbs. At 16, I was already working part-time there, and when I finished my business administration degree, my father offered me a formal position. During the last 10 years, we modernized the inventory system, created an online store, and doubled sales. My father was proud, and when he passed away, he left me his share of the business, 33%, and the responsibility of continuing his legacy. My brother Alejandro, 38, was always the family's problem child. Since he was little, he was my parents' favorite, especially my mother's. Intelligent but impulsive, always looking for the fast track to success, he never showed interest in the store. He preferred to venture into other businesses. Real estate, a restaurant, investments in startups, always looking for the big break, and always failing spectacularly. "I don't have your patience, little sister," he'd tell me every time he came to ask for money to cover some hole. Some of us were born for the big leagues. Those big leagues meant I ended up covering his debts, comforting Emma, his wife, when he disappeared for days on business trips that we all knew were gambling and drinking sprees. Despite everything, my father left him 10% of the store, but Alejandro never participated in the daily operations. My uncles, Eduardo, 61, and Marta, 58, owned the rest, 30% and 27%, respectively. There was always tension with them. While I was committed to expanding and modernizing, they preferred to keep things as they were. "Why change what works?" my uncle Eduardo would repeat every time I proposed something new. And although I could usually make decisions with my 33%, plus my brother's 10%, who out of habit always voted with me, major changes required an absolute majority. The real problem started 3 months ago when Alejandro showed up at my house on a Sunday night. He didn't come alone. He brought Emma and his 2 children, Mateo, 7, and Sofia, 5. The children's eyes were red from crying, and Emma looked like she had aged 10 years. "Elena, we're finished," Alejandro said while the children watched TV in the other room. "They've repossessed the house. We have to leave tomorrow." The panic in his eyes was real. It turned out he had mortgaged his house for the 3rd time to invest in an online casino that turned out to be a scam. He owed more than $300,000 to various lenders, some not very reputable. They had already left threatening messages for Emma. One guy had even followed Mateo from school. "How could you?" Emma asked him, tears in her eyes. "I warned you it was another scam." "I did it for us," he shouted. "To give you the life you deserve. What we deserve is a home, Alejandro, not your dreams of wealth." I let them stay at my house, of course. What other choice did I have? They are my family, and the children are not to blame for their father's bad decisions. A week later, Alejandro approached me in the kitchen while I was making breakfast for his children. "I've been thinking, Elena," he said quietly. "My share of the store isn't worth much, is it? Just 10%? Maybe about 80,000 pesos if we value the business fairly." Alejandro let out a bitter laugh. "It wouldn't even cover a third of my debts." I looked at him suspiciously. "What are you suggesting?" "I've received a call. There's a national chain, Delicates National, interested in our location." Alejandro avoided my gaze as he continued. "They're offering 800,000 for the whole place. The brand, the recipes, everything." I dropped the spatula I was holding. "You want to sell the store? Our grandparents' legacy? My life's work. It's to save my family, Elena," he exclaimed, his voice breaking. "These guys aren't playing. They've threatened my children. Do you understand? My children. There are other solutions, Alejandro. We can talk to a lawyer, declare bankruptcy, seek protection. You don't understand, he shouted, hitting the countertop. I've already talked to our aunts and uncles. They're considering it. That was like a punch in the stomach. You talked to them before me? I knew you'd react like this, he murmured. You've always been so selfish with that store. Selfish. The words hurt more than any blow. Who has been paying your debts for years? Who is giving your family a roof over their heads right now? Please, Elena. His tone changed to pleading. It's my only way out. If we sell, I can pay my debts, you'll get a good amount and everyone wins. We can't sell without my consent, Alejandro. You know that. His expression hardened. We'll see. For days I tried to contact my aunt and uncle, but they avoided my calls. Finally, my Aunt Marta agreed to meet me at the store on a Sunday when it was closed. Everyone was there. My aunt and uncle, my brother, and to my surprise my cousins Daniel, Eduardo's son, and Lucia, Marta's daughter. Both had small stakes, 5% each, which they had received as gifts years ago. Elena, be reasonable. My aunt began in her condescending tone. It's an offer we can't refuse. Alejandro needs the money, and frankly Eduardo and I are already thinking about retiring. This store is my life, I replied. It's our parents' legacy, our grandparents' legacy. It's not just a business, it's our family history. My uncle Eduardo adjusted his glasses impatiently. Sentimentalism doesn't pay bills. Look at your brother. He's desperate. I looked at Alejandro, who for the first time in weeks held my gaze. Elena, I'm begging you, he said, his voice breaking. It's not just for me, it's for my children. We can find other solutions. I can help you with part of my savings. We could restructure. Stop being so selfish, interrupted my cousin Daniel. Not all of us have the luxury of playing successful businesswomen. Some of us need that money now. The meeting got heated. I discovered that my cousins also had plans for the money. Daniel wanted to open his own business, and Lucia planned to move abroad. There are 5 in favor of selling and only you against, pointed out my Aunt Marta. You should accept it. I stood firm. We need a majority of shares, not people. Between my brother and me we have 43%. You can't sell without us. I saw an exchange of glances between my uncle and my brother. There was something they weren't telling me. Actually, said my brother, almost in a whisper, I've already signed my intent to sell. They have my power to vote. My world came crashing down. My own brother betraying me. With his 10%, my aunt, uncle, and cousins now totaled 72% against my 33%. The formal meeting will be this Friday, announced my uncle with a smile that didn't hide his triumph. But you already know the outcome. Alejandro didn't dare look at me as we left. I'm sorry, Elena, he murmured. I had no choice. There's always a choice, Alejandro, I replied bitterly. You chose to betray me. I left there devastated, but something inside me refused to give up. Deep down, I knew I had one card to play, one that my grandfather had entrusted to me years ago when he sensed this day might come. The following days were hell. Alejandro and his family continued to live at my house, under my roof eating my food, while he conspired behind my back to destroy my life. The worst part was seeing my nephews running down the hall, oblivious to everything, asking when we could go back to the store to try the special candies I always saved for them. One night, I heard Alejandro talking on the phone in the backyard. Thinking I couldn't hear him. Yes, it's all arranged, he was saying quietly. Elena won't be able to do anything. No, don't worry, my aunt and uncle have always supported me. Elena is the only one who... I froze. It had always been like this since we were little. Alejandro was the family's golden boy. He's a free spirit, my mother would say when he failed subjects. He has charisma for business, my father would justify when he dropped out of college. Give him time, my aunt and uncle would insist when he lost one job after another. Meanwhile, I had to be perfect. My excellent grades were expected. My hard work at the store was my responsibility. My ideas for improving the business were too risky until they proved successful, at which point everyone rushed to say they had always supported me. The next day I called 3 different lawyers. They all agreed. If Alejandro had formally ceded his voting right, I was numerically disadvantaged. Legally, it seemed I had no way out. Unless you find some clause in the original statutes, the last lawyer told me. I don't see how you could block the sale. That phrase triggered something in my memory. The original statutes. The envelope my grandfather had given me before he died with that cryptic warning. Open this only when the store is truly in danger. For years, that envelope remained locked in my safe. I had completely forgotten about it, perhaps because I never wanted to accept that my family could betray me like this. On Thursday night, the eve of the decisive meeting, Marco, the warehouse manager who had been with us for over 20 years, called me. He sounded worried. Elena, there's something you should know. His voice was tense. Your Uncle Eduardo and Daniel have been taking inventory secretly. I saw them taking pictures of our exclusive suppliers and copying contracts. When was this? 2 weeks ago. And there's more. I overheard a conversation between your uncle and your brother. The money from the sale won't be distributed equally. They're planning to give Alejandro a larger percentage to help him with his problems, plus a consulting position in the new management. The injustice hit me like a slap. Again, Alejandro receiving preferential treatment. Again, everything being sacrificed to rescue him from his mistakes. While I had turned down job offers abroad to maintain the family legacy, everyone was willing to sell it to save my brother from another one of his self-inflicted crises. That night, I finally opened the envelope. What I found inside left me breathless, but it also gave me the strength I needed to face what was coming. Before going to bed, I ran into Alejandro in the kitchen. He was pouring himself a glass of water, but from his glassy-eyed look, I knew he had been drinking something stronger earlier. Will you be able to forgive me someday? He asked, his voice hoarse. Why did you do it, Alejandro? Was it really the only solution? He shrugged. You'll never understand. You've always been the responsible one. The one who does everything right. Because I had to be. Because someone had to keep the business afloat while you squandered your share. There it is, he exclaimed with a bitter laugh. Perfect Elena judging me. And what good did it do me? Where is that potential now? His voice broke. I'm ruined, Elena. They threatened my children. This sale is my last chance. And what about my chances? My life dedicated to the store. You can always start over, he murmured. You're good at that. Like you've done so many times. I screw everything up and expect someone else to pay for it. He left without answering, leaving me alone with my anger and pain. The morning of the meeting, I arrived early at the store. Lucia greeted me with a condescending smile. I knew you'd come to your senses, she said, mistaking my punctuality for surrender. The same Lucia who called me the boring one in the family when she thought I wasn't listening. The meeting room was set up like a courtroom. At the head, my Uncle Eduardo in his special occasion suit. To his right, my aunt with her expression of false concern. Alejandro sat next to them, as always on the favored side. Daniel and Lucia closed the circle with barely concealed smiles. Also present was Fernando Lopez, a representative of Delicates National, the chain interested in buying us. A man of about 50, impeccably dressed, with a leather briefcase on the table. Well, began my Uncle Eduardo in a ceremonial voice, we are here to formalize the sale of Sabores del Valle to Delicates National for the amount of $800,000. $800,000 for the business that had been my grandparents' life's work, the livelihood of our family for decades, and to which I had dedicated the last 10 years of my life. My store was worth at least double that. Before we begin, Fernando intervened, I want to clarify that our offer is for the entire business, including the brand, recipes, customer portfolio, and of course this prime location. Everything is included, assured my Aunt Marta with a greedy smile, including my mother's secret recipes. I felt a pang of pain hearing her. My grandmother had spent hours teaching me those recipes, while my aunt considered them kitchen matters unworthy of her time. Elena, my Uncle Eduardo looked at me condescendingly, we understand your emotional attachment to the business. That's why we've decided that you'll receive an additional 5% of what you're entitled to compensate, for your dedication. The indignation flooded me. Not only were they taking away my life's work, but they thought they could buy my dignity with crumbs. A measly 1,200 extra for 10 years of tireless work, while Alejandro, who had never worked a day in the store, received extra help in a guaranteed position. Where does that extra 5% come from? I asked. Uncomfortable silence. Finally, Daniel replied. We each give up a little except Alejandro, I pointed out. He gets his full share plus additional help, right? The room fell silent. My brother had the decency to look ashamed. His circumstances are special, my Aunt Marta interjected. He has a family to support. And what about me? My work? My dedication? My sacrifices don't count? It's always about rescuing Alejandro at everyone else's expense. Elena is being dramatic, said my Uncle Eduardo. It's just a business. Maybe for you. For me, it's my life. Let's get down to business, intervened my uncle. We have the necessary votes. The decision is made. Fernando pulled out several documents from his briefcase. If everyone agrees, we can proceed with the signing. One moment, I said, standing up. Shouldn't we have a formal vote for transparency? Eduardo sighed exasperatedly, as if I were a capricious child delaying dinner. If you insist. Those in favor of selling the business for 800,000 pesos, raise your hands. My Uncle Eduardo, my Aunt Marta, Alejandro, Daniel, and Lucia raised their hands in unison. A perfect family united to betray me. 5 votes in favor, representing 72% of the shares, my uncle tallied. And I suppose you are against with your 33%? Majority rules, Elena, added my aunt with false compassion. It's family democracy. There were smiles and triumphant glances. Daniel even subtly high-fived Lucia under the table. My own brother seemed relieved, as if a weight had been lifted from him. It had always been this way. Everyone united to save Alejandro, regardless of the cost to others. So it's decided, declared my uncle, extending his hand towards the documents. Actually, I said calmly, I'd like to review something before we proceed. I reached into my bag and pulled out a yellowish envelope, the same one my grandfather had given me years ago. What's that? Asked my aunt, suddenly alert. Something we should read together before signing anything, I replied, placing the envelope in the center of the table. My Uncle Eduardo looked at it suspiciously. We don't have time for games, Elena. The decision is made. I insist, I said, sliding the envelope towards Fernando. As an external representative, perhaps Mr. Lopez could read it, for greater impartiality. Intrigued, Fernando took the envelope. I see no problem in reviewing additional documentation before finalizing a transaction of this magnitude. The atmosphere shifted. My aunt and uncle's confidence turned to unease. Go ahead, I said with a contained smile, knowing that what would follow would change everything. Let's read this together. As Fernando carefully opened the envelope, I noticed Alejandro looking at me with a mixture of curiosity and fear. For the first time in his life, he seemed to realize that he might not get away with this. Fernando extracted several documents and began to read them, first silently. His professional expression gave way to surprise, then discomfort. Well, he finally said, this certainly changes things. Fernando cleared his throat and began to read aloud. Special clause of the founding statutes of Sabores del Valle, notarized on May 12, 1975. My Uncle Eduardo interrupted abruptly. What is this? The original statutes are at my house. This must be a forgery. In fact, continued Fernando, checking the notary seal, these documents seem perfectly legitimate. And according to the registration date, these predate any subsequent modifications. My Uncle Eduardo's face began to redden. Let me see that, he demanded, reaching out. Allow me to finish reading first, replied Fernando with professional firmness. He continued, I, Miguel Sanchez, in full use of my faculties, establish that any attempt to sell the business in its entirety will require the unanimous approval of the family council. In case of disagreement, the family member who has dedicated the most consecutive years working directly in the administration of the business will have veto power over the decision. The silence that followed was absolute. Only the hum of the refrigerator in the back of the store could be heard. Additionally, Fernando continued, turning the page, There is a memorandum signed by Mr. Miguel Sanchez, dated 2 months before his death, ratifying this clause and specifically naming Elena Sanchez as guardian of the family legacy in recognition of her dedication and commitment to the business. My Aunt Marta turned pale. This is absurd. Why haven't we seen these documents before? Because my grandfather left them specifically in my care, I replied, feeling a mixture of sadness and satisfaction. He told me to keep them for when the family forgot what really matters. Fernando extracted another document. There's more. A detailed record of hours worked and compensation received by each family member over the last 20 years. Now it was my turn to be surprised. I didn't remember that document in the envelope. According to these records, Fernando continued, Miss Elena has worked an average of 60 hours per week for the last 10 years, while he paused awkwardly. No other family member has exceeded 5 hours per week in the same period. My uncle Eduardo shifted in his chair. That can't be true. There is also a breakdown of the dividends distributed, added Fernando, leafing through more papers. It seems that everyone has received payments proportional to their shares, regardless of their contribution to the business. It was true. For years, I had watched my family punctually collect their quarterly checks without setting foot in the store. My uncle Eduardo only appeared for board meetings and to collect his share. My Aunt Marta delegated even the signing of documents. Daniel and Lucia didn't even know where the main products were stored. And Alejandro only came when he needed advances. Meanwhile, I opened the store at 6 a.m. to receive suppliers, worked weekends when staff was short, stayed until midnight doing inventory, and spent my vacations attending food fairs to find new products. All to keep my grandparents' dream alive, while my family saw it as a money-making machine that magically worked effortlessly. Fernando continued reading, and finally, there is an additional clause that states that in the event that any family member sells their shares without unanimous consent, said shares will be offered first to the member with the greatest work dedication, at book value, not market value. The implications hit the room like a bomb. Book value meant the accounting value, approximately 1/3 of the real market value. My uncle Eduardo stood up furiously. This is an outrage. These clauses were never approved. The document has all the signatures including yours, Mr. Eduardo. Fernando pointed out, showing him the page. It must be a forgery, insisted my uncle. The document has been verified by a notary, Fernando retorted. Legally, it's binding. I slowly stood up, feeling a calmness I hadn't experienced in weeks. So this is what's going to happen now. First, the sale to Delicates National is cancelled. Second, given that you have all attempted to sell your shares without my consent, activating the clause Mr. Fernando just read, I exercise my right to buy your shares at book value. You can't do that, shouted my Aunt Marta. We need that money. You should have thought about that before trying to sell the business behind my back, the business to which I have dedicated my life, I replied without giving in. But I am not as ruthless as you. I will offer you an alternative. You can keep 5% of your current shares and continue to receive dividends, but on the condition that you actually work in the store, a verifiable minimum of 20 hours per week. Daniel laughed scornfully. And what happens if we refuse? Then I exercise my legal right to 100% and you will receive only the book value, which, after deducting outstanding debts and reinvestments, is approximately a quarter of what they would have offered you in the sale. You can't be serious, Lucia murmured. I've never been more serious, I replied. You have abused my work for years. You have collected dividends from a business you despise. And now you were trying to sell it to save yourselves, without considering what it means to me. I turned to Alejandro. As for you, brother, you will also have to work if you want to keep your shares. But first, you will have to complete a rehabilitation program for your gambling addiction. I will help you with your debts, but with loans that you will repay by working, not with gifts. This is blackmail, protested my uncle Eduardo. No, this is justice. And it's legal. Ask any lawyer. Fernando cleared his throat uncomfortably. I must say these documents seem to be in order. If you'll excuse me, I think I should inform my superiors about the change in the situation. When he left, chaos erupted. My uncle Eduardo threatened to sue me. My Aunt Marta cried, saying I was ruining her. Daniel cursed me openly, and Lucia just stared at me in shock. You have a week to decide, I said, calmly gathering my things. Work under the new conditions or sell your shares at book value. And by the way, the offer from Delicates National was ridiculously low. The business is worth at least double, which means you were willing to undersell it just to get rid of it quickly. 6 months later, Sabores del Valle is unrecognizable, but in the best sense. I hired a team of young people passionate about gastronomy, expanded the online store, and our sales have doubled. My uncle Eduardo and my Aunt Marta chose to sell their shares at book value, furious but powerless in the face of legal evidence. Now I see them occasionally at the supermarket, with bitter expressions when they see me. They've had to sell their summer house and cancel their annual vacations in Europe. Sometimes I feel bad for them, but then I remember how they tried to steal my life's work. Daniel also sold, but he went further. He moved to another city to avoid the shame of seeing the success of the business he despised. According to what I've heard, he had to settle for a basic administrative job, far from the dreams of grandeur he had. Surprisingly, Lucia decided to accept my conditions. After 2 months of cleaning shelves and serving customers, she discovered that she really enjoyed contact with people. Now she manages our import program and has shown a good eye for new products. As for Alejandro, he completed his rehabilitation and works with me in marketing. We're still rebuilding our relationship, but there's more trust every day. His children now have a present and responsible father, and Emma has thanked me with tears in her eyes for giving her back the man she met. In the end, I learned the most valuable lesson of all. Family isn't defined by blood but by actions. As I sat in my office, looking at the photos of my grandfather on the wall, I realized that I had won something more valuable than a store. The real victory wasn't the money, not even keeping the business. It was seeing the panic in their eyes when they realized that their years of taking advantage of my work were over. It was the exact moment they understood that karma exists, and it has an excellent memory. For all those who feel used by their family, keep your receipts, know your rights, and be patient. The universe has a wonderful way of balancing things when you least expect it. And when that moment comes, allow yourself to enjoy the sweet satisfaction of seeing the faces of those who never valued your effort turn pale. As the saying goes, sow the wind and reap the whirlwind. My family sowed years of greed, and now they are reaping the consequences of their actions. And I, for the first time in my life, sleep soundly, knowing that justice sometimes arrives in yellowish envelopes.